My name is Ayana, and I'm just a simple woman with a love for nature's quiet magic. Life has a way of hiding secrets beneath the soil, and sometimes they bloom when you least expect it. It all started after my husband passed away. Grief is a strange thing. It changes you, makes you seek comfort in the most unexpected places. For me, that place was a garden, not my own, but one that belonged to a man named Mr. Langston. He was 76, soft-spoken but observant, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. His wife had been gone for years, and his house, along with the once stunning garden she had adored, had grown quiet, almost forgotten. The first time I saw him, he was standing on his porch, watching me with an intensity that made my heart skip. His gaze wasn't threatening, but there was something about the way he studied me that I couldn't ignore. "It used to be her pride and joy," he murmured, almost to himself, looking over the tangled vines and fading flowers. "She'd hate to see it like this." His voice was rough, like someone who had spent too long in silence. I could feel the weight of his loss in those words. But something inside me stirred. Maybe it was the way he looked at that overgrown garden, like it was a reflection of his own heart. I had been there before, lost, broken, clinging to whatever still had life in it. I nodded. "Then we'll bring it back together," I said, offering him a small smile. At first, our interactions were brief. He would watch me from the porch, sometimes offering a quiet thank you as I packed up for the day. But over time, those moments stretched longer. He started lingering a little closer, asking about the plants I was trimming, sharing memories of his late wife, Delores. She loved roses, he told me one afternoon, running his fingers over a delicate petal. Said they reminded her of love, beautiful but sharp if you're not careful. His words stayed with me. Roses, love, and thorns. It all felt too familiar. I had lost my husband 2 years ago, and since then I had felt every thorn life had to offer. But something about being in that garden with him started to feel different. Maybe, just maybe, the thorns didn't hurt as much when you weren't facing them alone. One warm afternoon, I was kneeling by the flower beds, wiping sweat from my brow, when I noticed him watching me. This time, he wasn't on the porch. He was standing just a few feet away, his gaze steady. "You're good at this," he said softly, his eyes meeting mine. "Bringing life back to something that's almost gone." "You have to be gentle," I replied, tilting my head toward him. "If you're too rough, you'll break them. But if you're too soft, they'll never grow strong." I glanced up, brushing dirt from my hands, kind of like people. A hint of a smile touched his lips, the first one I'd ever seen. "Is that so, Ayana?" he asked, his voice low and smooth, like warm honey. From that moment on, things shifted. Our conversations weren't just about plants anymore. We talked about life, love, and the kind of loneliness that sneaks up on you when you least expect it. One evening, as the sun dipped low, casting golden light over the garden, I sat on an old stone bench near the rose bushes. Mr. Langston walked over, hesitating for only a moment before sitting beside me. And for the first time in a long time, the silence between us wasn't empty. It was full of something unspoken, something waiting to bloom. "How does this feel? Let me know if you want any other tweaks." Without a word, we sat in silence, the kind that's comfortable, not awkward. I glanced at him, and for the first time, I saw something different in his eyes. Not just sadness, but longing. I'd seen that look before. I'd felt it too. "Do you ever miss being close to someone?" I asked softly, turning to face him. His eyes flicked to mine, and for a moment I wondered if I'd crossed a line. But then he nodded slowly, deliberately. "Every single day," he replied, his voice rough with honesty. His gaze stayed on mine, and for a moment it felt like we were the only two people in the world. I don't know what came over me, but I reached for his hand, lacing my fingers with his. His breath hitched, but he didn't pull away. "It's okay to want that," I said, my voice steady. "It's okay to feel that." That night I invited him inside, not for anything wild or reckless, but because sometimes being close to someone is its own kind of healing. He hesitated at the door, his hand resting on the frame like he might change his mind. But then I smiled and said, "You're welcome here, Mr. Langston. No expectations, just warmth." He stepped inside, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone. We shared tea, stories, and laughter. There were no grand declarations of love, no sweeping confessions, just two people trying to remember what it felt like to be seen and valued. That night, as I watched him walk away from my door, something inside me had shifted too. The next morning, the roses in the garden seemed brighter, the air warmer, the sun a little softer on my skin. Maybe it was just a coincidence, or maybe it was something more. Love doesn't always have to be big and dramatic. Sometimes it's as simple as sharing a cup of tea and knowing you're not alone anymore. People think gardens are about beauty, the colors, the flowers, the perfect symmetry of nature's design, but they're wrong. Gardens are about patience,